In this chapter, in the module discussing the shift from global capitalism to sustainable development, I want to talk about education for sustainable development. Education is crucial for global development and for the success of sustainable development. But in this chapter, I'd like to speak about the content of learning to be good citizens in a new kind of world, a world that is organized around the principles of sustainable development. And it's notable that in the Sustainable Development Goals, Target 4.7, remembering that SDG 4 is for universal access to quality education, the importance of educating global citizens to understand our challenges was very strongly noted. Let me read Target 4.7. It says, by 2030, ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and nonviolence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. This is really a lovely target, I have to say. It recognizes that if we're going to achieve our ambitions of a world without poverty, of a world of social inclusion, of a world of environmental sustainability, we need to help young people, especially, to understand these goals and why they are so important and how they can be fulfilled. Part of that, to be sure, is technical training. Sustainable development as a field is partly a technical field to understand how economic systems, political systems, social systems, earth systems, such as climate, and engineering systems, such as the power grid, interact. And that requires a tremendous amount of study. No individual discipline, not economics or sociology or politics or electrical engineering or climatology or public health or ecology or agronomy, can comprehend the purposes, meaning, and solutions of the challenges of sustainable development. So inherently, we are giving birth to a new field that itself is a systems thinking field, but really it's a system of systems. It involves how to integrate the various perspectives of our economic, social, and political systems with the perspectives of technologies and the perspectives of Earth system functioning, biodiversity, climate, and the like. And that will require a tremendous amount of understanding and a tremendous amount of new training. And it apparently does not come easy because we see so many people who don't understand the basics of climate change, who either regard it as a myth or think that it's easy to lie and cheat and falsely deny climate science because they think it's some kind of game. They clearly don't understand very deeply what is at stake. And we need the young generation to really understand what is at stake. So integrated cross-disciplinary learning that starts in primary school helps children to understand their local ecology and carries forward throughout a lifetime of learning about sustainable development will be extraordinarily important. But there's another aspect of this target that I find equally inspiring, and that is the idea of promoting a culture of peace and nonviolence, promoting global citizenship, promoting the appreciation of cultural diversity and of culture's contribution to sustainable development, because this too requires an education. And it is possible to help all of us understand diversity and to understand what it means to be a responsible global citizen through a process of education, of examples, of historical circumstances, of our own brain makeup. One of the things we've learned from neuroscience and new fields such as evolutionary psychology is that we're prone to a lot of mistakes in cognition, in judgment, in our reactions to events, in our vulnerabilities to being overcome with fear. And one of the tremendous lessons of modern psychology and neuroscience is our vulnerability to group ourselves with an identity of an us versus others versus them, the opposite of global citizenship. War, conflict, interethnic violence is not only a tragic circumstance, but is rather deeply ingrained in human nature and probably deeply entrained in our psychology. Modern evolutionary biologists are surmising that our human nature was formed with two-level competition of evolution. At one level, we are competing with others within our group and our community. And it is probably the case that part of our human nature came through intergroup rivalry and competition, fights between clans, for example, or small communities fighting for territorial control over a homestead or food supply or a water source. And the idea of these evolutionary psychologists is that this two-level process of evolution creates a tendency towards strong commitments of cooperation within groups, but often hatred across groups, that we learn to be very loyal, rooting for the home team, but we despise the others, or that we are naturally cooperative within our own communities, but easily triggered to be hostile, abusive, even murderous towards others. And if this is indeed the case, part of our human nature, it is also something that we need to understand and actually to overcome, because if we are vulnerable to easy priming that gets us revved up in an us versus them approach, then our vulnerability to the self-fulfilling prophecy of war and of conflict becomes very, very great. To my mind, one of the core lessons of global citizenship, core purposes of education for global citizenship, is to teach us something about our human nature, our propensities to group identity, our propensities to slide into an us versus them mentality, our vulnerability to interethnic, interracial, intergroup conflict. So if it is really true that our human nature was forged in this two-level selection where we are easily primed to be highly cooperative within our groups, but highly aggressive between groups, we need to understand that. And children and all of us as we experience life, but also within our education, can be helped to understand the importance of cooperation and the reasons why even perhaps innately it is prone to failing at crucial moments. We can use the new evolutionary psychology to help us understand why it is groups that are living amongst each other peacefully for generations can suddenly explode into intergroup violence, even into genocides, seemingly contradicting the long history of peaceful life together. But once we understand how we are probably hardwired in a way to that kind of vulnerability, we can avoid some of the dark side of our own nature. I appreciate the idea, therefore, of teaching the commonality of our human nature, the appreciation for diversity as something that enriches rather than threatens us, the fact that the major religious traditions around the world share core ideas and beliefs about human dignity that can help us live peacefully together and overcome this tendency towards division. And in phrasing this goal as education towards an appreciation of diversity, of cultural diversity, I recall fondly some of my favorite words of President John F. Kennedy, who talked about how by understanding our own attitudes better and thinking them through, we can come to live better in a diverse world. He said in his great speech on peace in 1963, "So let us not be blind to our differences, but let us also direct attention to our common interests and to the means by which those differences can be resolved. And if we cannot end now our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air, we all cherish our children's futures, and we are all mortal." Well, these are things we can learn. These are things we can teach. We can teach them in schools, and most importantly, I hope we can teach them by good example. But they are fundamental for a world of sustainable development.